A few years ago, the Vatican opened its archives to scholars studying the war years of the controversial pontificate of Pope Pius XII. For decades, some have criticized the late pontiff for his alleged failure to speak out against the Holocaust. Last week, there were a flurry of stories in the news claiming that a letter had been discovered proving that Pius XII and the Vatican knew about the Holocaust sooner than they had admitted. Here to react is sociologist and president of the Catholic League, Bill Donohue, and distinguished professor of law at the University of Mississippi and author of Hitler, the War, and the Pope, Ron Rychlak. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here. Ron, I want to start with you. For decades, the Vatican, the Catholic League, and scholars like you have been answering these charges that Pius XII did nothing or was actually complicit in the Holocaust. An official at the Vatican archives recently discovered a letter written by a German Jesuit, Father Lothar Koenig, dated December 1942. It suggests that the Vatican knew what was happening in Nazi concentration camps. Ron, give us some background on this new piece of what's being called evidence. What kind of information does the letter contain? And is there anything new here that wasn't part of the record?
Well, thank you very much, Raymond, for having us on to talk about this. I'll tell you, when I first saw the story, I had several people email me, I thought it was nothing because this letter is dated a full 2 days before the Allies issued their statement, which Pius had seen in advance. It was issued 4 days after the Polish government in exile had issued a statement on this. And 10 days later, Pope Pius XII issued his statement talking about this. It really did not move the needle at all in terms of when Pius XII knew stuff. We've known for a long time that by December of 1942, he was well informed. He was working with the plots to overthrow Hitler. And yet this made headlines as if it were some major breakthrough. It's really the only important news from it is it's once again verification because the author said, hey, please don't tell people about this because it will get me and others engaged in rescue work killed.
Bill, you issued a press release in early September about this new documentation that found evidence that Rome actually did shelter and protect large numbers of Jews during the Nazi occupation of Rome. Why do you think there was precious little coverage of that story compared to what this Koenig letter is getting internationally?
Well, it has the same thing it is the exact same reason why the clergy sexual abuse scandal, which has long been over, doesn't get any press when they find out there's virtually none going on. Bad news about the Catholic Church, real and contrived, is going to make the media. Good news is not going to make the media. You have Sir Martin Gilbert, one of the greatest authorities on the Holocaust, who said that over 3,000 Jews were saved by Catholics when the Nazis came into Rome on the direct orders of the Pope. You see, they want to make it sound like every nun and priest and layperson went out there on his own. No doubt some of them did. But they don't want to give any credit to Pius. And by the way, the real question is this. Pius was labored on. I've written about it. Ron is the real authority here, not me. He was labored on by New York Jews and others. Do not say a word. We're not having any parades. We're not having any demonstrations. We know what's going on. It's only going to make matters worse. Now, what if Pius said, I think you're wrong. I'm going to speak out and scream from the mountains? What would happen then if Hitler was even more savage in his response? Then they would say that you betrayed us. And by the way, it's always compared to what? During the war years, for 3 years, while the Nazis were in control, including at the time of the extermination, the New York Times had a total, count them, 9, 3 editorials per year for 3 years, 9 editorials. And when they talked about the extermination, I'm not making this up, I have the proof, they put an ad for turkeys for Thanksgiving Day on the same page where they talked about the extermination of the Jews. So it's always compared to what? Look, the archives are showing that our side is winning this war, and that's why the media are not happy about it.
Ron, I want to take a closer look at this timeline. Okay, it's well known by scholars. I mean, you referenced this earlier. The Vatican was receiving reports of Nazi atrocities as early as 1941. The Koenig letter came only days, as you mentioned, before the Allied joint statement on Nazi brutality. It read this way: from all the occupied countries, Jews are being transported in conditions of appalling horror and brutality to Eastern Europe. In Poland, which has been made the principal Nazi slaughterhouse, the ghettos established by the German invader are being systematically emptied of all Jews except a few highly skilled workers required for war industries. None of those taken away are ever heard of again. And that's, of course, that Allied statement. Now, Ron, Pius didn't join that statement, but he surely saw it. And then he made his own statement on Christmas Day of 1942. Tell us about that.
Well, exactly correct, Raymond. He clearly saw it. It was an Allied statement. He was not a member of the Allies. The Holy See was neutral. However, on Christmas Eve, December 24th, he issued his own statement speaking of hundreds of thousands of people who, without any fault of their own, sometimes only because of their nationality or race, he used a term that was well understood to mean Jewish, were being consigned to gradual extinction. They were being eliminated. In the context of the time, the statement from the Polish government exile, the statement of the Allies, everyone understood where the Pope stood, which is why on Christmas Day, the New York Times editorial praised Pius XII for being a lonely voice out of the silence of a continent.
Yeah. So, Ron, okay, the New York Times praised him. World leaders praised him at the time. My question is, does the Koenig letter prove that the Vatican was somehow indifferent or complicit in the Nazi Holocaust?
No, literally, my first response was, hey, this is good news. It shows that the Pope, and it's another piece of evidence, the Pope was warned not to speak out, not to pound the bully pulpit. It doesn't move the needle at all on when he knew about things. He picked a program of careful involvement with the folks who are trying to topple Hitler, the plots, and with negotiation, with diplomacy to try to do what he could and rescue, to save people, and did tremendous work with that.
Well, as Bill has written about, I mean, there were 800,000 Jews that he probably saved. That's the estimate in Catholic entities throughout the world, but certainly in Rome. I mean, they were housing. I interviewed nuns who sheltered Jewish families in their convent at their own peril. Bill, as a media watcher, I want to get your take on this. Part of the Koenig letter is being selectively ignored by many outlets. Ron referenced this earlier. Father Koenig, in the letter, urged the Holy See to not publicize what he was revealing for fear of his own life and the lives of others who had provided the intelligence that he was reporting. Why omit that important imperative in the source letter, Bill? Is that just sloppy journalism or something more?
No, that's intentional. They know exactly what they do. It provides an off-ramp for the Pope. Listen, as I say, the Jewish leaders all over the world, and certainly right here in New York City, they implored the Pope to do what you can to help us out, but don't raise the decibel level. We saw what happened with the Dutch when some of them spoke up like this. The best way to handle it, after all, the Pope didn't have an army, an air force, a Marine Corps. I mean, what exactly was he supposed to do? We know that Hitler had plotted to assassinate him. You're not going to assassinate somebody unless you think he's a threat. No, the Pope did what he could, given the circumstances of the time. And when I compare what the Pope did to other religious and secular leaders, he comes out the hero. Yeah.
I mean, even FDR turned away a whole ship of Jewish refugees. I mean, it's amazing the isolation that Pius XII is subjected to historically when they don't consider the wider record and what he was doing, again, at the risk of his own people and religious houses all over Rome. Ron, I want to get your thoughts on the way this story has been reported. It doesn't change the timeline, nor does it change the fact that the Vatican was working constantly back-channel diplomacy and sheltering Jews in Rome during this occupation. Obviously, Pius XII and the Vatican Secretary of State had to be careful when handling any kind of intelligence regarding these atrocities. Why did news of the Koenig letter move the needle at all, or did it?
Well, literally, I don't think it did among people who study this, but it made headlines all over the place. So one of the most offensive parts is many of these articles where it was a headline that the Pope knew about the Holocaust didn't even mention the part where the Pope was warned not to speak out about this. Because a lot of people, I mean, there was a plot developed to try to discredit the Pope, discredit other Catholic leaders as well, in these newly communized areas after World War II. That's really what all this dates back to, is a big disinformation campaign to portray the Pope and other Catholic leaders as sympathetic to the Nazis or uncaring about the Jews or afraid of Hitler. The narrative changes to fit the needs of the hour. But the truth of the matter is, Pius XII did what he thought was appropriate. In retrospect, I think, it's fair to argue and debate whether a different avenue might have worked, but I'll defend the avenue he took, and it certainly was taken in good faith.
Ron, have you had a chance to go back into the archives since the end of the pandemic? As I recall, COVID kept you from a planned visit there.
COVID did cancel my trip, and I have not made it back to Italy since. I've had a number of issues that kept me away. I'm hoping maybe next summer. I've traced all the new findings, which I think is the important thing.
All right, Ron Rychlak, thank you for your insights. And Ron's book, Hitler, the War, and the Pope, is required reading for anybody interested in this wartime pontificate of Pius XII. Bill Donohue, before I let you go, I want to get your thoughts on a few stories you've been keeping your eye on. In a tale that's been missed, I think, Attorney General Merrick Garland testified before Congress on September 20th. And he claims he knew nothing about this FBI investigation of traditional Catholics. FBI Director Christopher Wray has testified to the same effect. Despite those testimonies, there has still been no public statement by the FBI or the DOJ showing their intent to get to the bottom of this situation. You've written a letter to the House Judiciary Chair, Jim Jordan. Why?
Because, first of all, Jim Jordan has been a real friend. He has been great. I've written several letters to him about Jane's revenge and these people, which Merrick Garland didn't know anything about them. They're the ones who burned down the Catholic churches following the overturning of Roe v. Wade. He never seems to know anything about anything. Jim Jordan is a friend. He chairs the House Judiciary Committee, and he's been looking into this. And so, listen, I even if I give them the benefit of the doubt, let's say Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI, and Garland, the Attorney General, let's say they didn't know exactly what they were doing in the field offices. We know it was in Portland. We know it was in Los Angeles. We know it was in Richmond. They know now, don't they? So the word aghast was used by Wray when he first heard about it. The word appalling was used by the Attorney General, Merrick Garland. Okay, so if you're aghast and appalled, now you know what happened. Why hasn't anybody been fired? Where is the internal review? Who's being held accountable? How did this start? Was there somebody outside the FBI who came up with this idea? And by the way, I had a nose from this from the beginning. I knew it wasn't just, quote, traditional Catholics, and anybody happens to like the Latin Mass and has criticized the Pope on occasion. Now, all of a sudden, I said, no, wait a minute, they're going to go beyond that. And yes, they finally came out and admitted, yes, there was another level. They went after mainline Catholics. They wanted Catholics to spy on each other. My problem with Garland and with Wray is, even if you didn't know, then you know now, and what have you done about it? Absolutely nothing.
Bill, I want to switch gears here. In January, the League released a film, a documentary, Walt's Disenchanted Kingdom. It was a documentary on the decline of Disney and its pursuit of a particular political agenda. Now, since then, we've seen this ongoing battle between Disney and the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis. Disney's stock has plummeted. The theme parks are operating at a loss. What is your take on this pushback that Disney has received this year? And is it making an impression on the way they do business, do you think?
Well, we know it's the culture war. And I don't know how much, I'll never know what role our documentary played. It obviously played some role, otherwise they wouldn't be crashing. We know, for example, forget what I've done. Listen to what Bob Iger has said. He has said repeatedly, we don't want to be part of a culture war. We don't have an agenda. We've got the message. We want to quiet things. Now, you don't say that because you're having problems at the theme park. We know what he's talking about. He's gotten pushback, not only from the Catholic League, but by people of faith across the country. He's gotten pushback from the Muslim countries, which won't even show his movies. They lost over $900 million with 8 movies over the summer. They're in trouble. And you know what? Last year, Carrie Burke, she's no longer the head of content. They moved into another position, but she's still there. Carrie Burke was the head of content. Last year, she said, 50% of all of our new characters are going to be LGBTQ plus 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 plus. And I say, well, wait a minute now. Have they reversed gears now? Is Iger saying we got the message, we got the memo, and we're going to pare back? Why don't they just get back to the Snow White and the Lion King days, which were wholesome, good entertainment, and stop with the left-wing agenda, with what they're feeding? No, they got the message, and to see them writhing this way, I have to say there's a certain amount of, what would the Germans say, Schadenfreude?
Bill, in recent months, we have seen these flash mobs who descend upon malls and outdoor establishments, and it's a smash and grab robbery operation. The most recent example being in Philadelphia, where 100 youths ransacked stores and stole property. You just wrote a piece about this on the decriminalization of crime and larceny. Is this laissez-faire attitude toward crime by local officials and law enforcement feeding this new wave of criminal activity? What did you find?
We never had anything like this back in the 1990s in New York City, or when Giuliani was here. We didn't have it until more recent times. The breakdown occurred, at least in New York, with people like de Blasio and George Soros-funded DAs in big cities around the country. After the George Floyd fiasco, they basically told the cops, if we don't want to defund you, we want to demonize you. And they got the message. I see it here every day in New York. People break the law blithely, with alacrity. They jump the turnstiles, they smoke up, they shoot up their needles in front of you, and the cops see it and nobody does a thing about it. The word is out. There's no accountability. And people will act like savages unless there's some kind of a law and order.
Bill Donohue, we will leave it there. You can keep up with the work of Bill Donohue and the Catholic League at catholicleague.org. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.